I had just stepped into the yard after my sister's funeral when I saw my mother's wedding dress, the only keepsake left after 40 years, draped over the flower bed, soaked and caked with mud. My daughter-in-law stood in the doorway and said coldly, "My child needs a private room. That pile of trash just needs to be thrown out." That sentence shattered the grief I hadn't finished grieving. My son only shrugged and said nothing. When I bent down to pick up the wedding photo frame, she walked right past me, her heel crushing the glass. A shard cut my hand and I didn't even feel it. My throat tightened, my heart clenched, the feeling of being humiliated in my own home. I quietly took out my phone, photographed everything, and sent it to the one person who knew I'd been wary of this. That night, I didn't cry. I only whispered, "If she wants a war, I'll make sure she tastes defeat under my own roof." If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Vivian Cole, 65 years old, living in the suburbs of Portland, Oregon. I had just returned from Phoenix, Arizona, after my sister's funeral, the last person in my family who ever called me little sister. The flight was long, my body tired, my heart empty, yet the scene in the front yard jolted me awake like a bucket of cold water. This house, the 2-story cedar home with dark brown shingles, has been where I've lived for more than 30 years. I bought it after my husband died, painted every wall myself, replaced every floor tile. A lifetime as an accountant didn't make me rich, but it made me meticulous. Everything in this house bears the marks of love, effort, and memory. And now those memories lay scattered across the lawn, wet with rain and muddied like trash. The wooden chest my brother hand-built in 1978 was pried open, my mother's leather notebook was soaked, and my hand-stitched embroidery had blown up onto the steps. I walked slowly, picking up each item as if gathering the trampled pieces of my own memory. Sloane still stood there, arms crossed, her stomach flat under a silk dress. "I already said you have to move into the back storage room," she said evenly, cold. "The upstairs bedroom will be the baby's room." I looked around. There was no sign of preparing for a child, just a convenient excuse to push me out. I gave a small laugh that never reached my eyes. "The storage room?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "That's where you can be quieter." I didn't argue. I walked down the little slope to the back. The wooden door creaked open, and the smell of damp and dust hit my nose. Inside were a dirty folding mattress, a bare ceiling socket, and a small window draped in cobwebs. No table, no chair, no blanket. I sat on that mattress and took a deep breath. Humiliation twisted in my chest, but tears didn't fall. I pulled out my phone and photographed every corner of the room, every tossed-out item, every footprint on the floor. I used to think I understood Sloane, smooth, charming, good at winning people over. When Andrew introduced her 10 years ago, I was quietly happy. Finally, my son has someone by his side. I didn't know that someone would slowly edge me out of my son's life until I became just an old object in their eyes. That night, Andrew came home late. The door to my room, now the storage room, opened a crack, hallway light spilling in. "Mom," he said tiredly. "Don't mind it. Sloane is stressed. She needs her own space." I looked at my son, the face I'd loved and trusted most. "And what about you?" I asked. He avoided my gaze. "You know, my wife comes first." The door shut with a soft squeal of the hinge. The room went dark again. I opened my phone and checked the secondary account I'd once let Andrew use for emergencies. A string of odd transactions popped up. Interior design, baby room paint, weekend Napa Valley, luxury spa package. Each line was like a knife cut. Nearly $6,000 in 2 months. I knew that was just the tip of the iceberg. I'd heard Sloane hint about selling a few old pieces to refresh the space. Now I understood she'd sold my memories to buy meaningless things. Late at night, I opened my contacts and tapped Amit Patel, the attorney who helped me with insurance paperwork 10 years ago. "I need to see you," I said. "Tomorrow, 9 a.m. "What happened, Miss Vivian?" "Family," I answered briefly. "And I need to protect what's left." Before bed, I heard a car in the driveway. I peeked through the curtain. Sloan was driving an ivory Lexus, the car she said she borrowed from a friend. But the interior light was bright enough for me to see a new designer handbag on the passenger seat. Early the next morning, as I took the trash to the curb, Mrs. Whitaker, my neighbor of nearly 20 years, called softly, "Vivian, I have to tell you this. Last week I saw a man deliver several big boxes to Sloan. She told me they were nursery decorations, but when I got closer, it was obvious designer goods, shoes, bags, perfume. The delivery service was expensive." I nodded, thanked her, and said nothing more. In my head, the fragments of suspicion clicked into a complete picture. I went back inside and looked around the cold little room. Every grain in the wood floor felt like it was whispering something. I sat on the edge of the mattress, took out a notebook, and wrote the first line with blue ink. March 14th. Begin collecting evidence. Then, I told myself, quietly but firmly, if I have to stay in a storage room, I'll stay there as a plaintiff, not as a freeloader. I closed the notebook and looked up at the dim ceiling. For the first time in years, I didn't feel weak. I felt like a woman who knew exactly what she was about to do. The next morning, when the first sunlight cut through the dusty little window of the storage room, I woke heavy-hearted. I'd only slept a few hours. A sharp pain in my chest made me sit up and breathe deep. Beside the folding mattress was my old suitcase with the few things I still kept: some clothes, a chipped photo frame, and the expense ledger I'd carried everywhere since working as an accountant at the city's architecture office. I opened it, line after line, tidy and careful. Every roof repair, pipe replacement, furnace maintenance, I had recorded the date, cost, and contractor. I always thought that habit was pointless until now. I grabbed my laptop, opened my bank account, and matched each item to the handwritten ledger. On the very first line, my heart squeezed. Interior design, $12,800. Under it, baby room decoration, $3,400. Spa maternity retreat, deposit $2,500. Napa Valley weekend, $7,900. One by one. Over 8 months, the total pulled from the secondary account I'd let Andrew use for emergencies added up to $86,400. I didn't need to be an accountant anymore to understand. This wasn't family expense, it was indulgence on my dime. I leaned against the wall, breathing deep to steady myself. 10 years ago, when Andrew got married, I added his name to a secondary account because I trusted him. I thought it would make emergencies easier. That emergency turned out to be vacations, designer bags, and pastel walls I never agreed to pay for. I turned off the screen, closed the ledger, and fought the tremor in my hands. I went upstairs to find more evidence. The living room where my mother's walnut cabinet once stood, the one she scrimped for all year to buy at the antique market in 1962, was now bare. In its place stood a shiny, sleek, soulless piece. I froze, hand touching the empty spot in the floor where the old cabinet used to be, a chill running up my spine. I stepped onto the porch where my father's rocking chair had always sat. I'd repainted it last year, keeping the scratch on the left arm as a keepsake. Now, only a lighter square of tile remained, a mark of absence. I went back in, opened my phone, and pulled up Marketplace, the app the kids use to sell second-hand things. I typed a few keywords: walnut rocking chair, vintage, Portland. Dozens of results appeared. I scrolled and my heart stopped for a moment. A listing had expired 3 days ago, but the thumbnail was still clear. My father's chair, the scratch on the left arm, exactly as I remembered. Below it, sold. $650. I set the phone down, took a long breath, but couldn't stop the short gasps. An object is just a thing, but to me it was memory, proof that I had existed. And now Sloan had sold everything piece by piece. I didn't scream, and I didn't call Andrew. Instead, I opened my laptop and created a new folder. Across the screen, I typed, "Case, Sloan." I dropped in everything: photos of the belongings thrown into the yard, shots of the storage room, the missing cabinet, the chair listing, the bank statements, the saved ad images. Every file was carefully named: 0, 1, _ entryway.jpg, 2, rocking chair ad, PNG, 3, bank statement, PDF. I did it with the quiet of someone who'd already lived through too much loss. At my age, I know, anger weakens you. Evidence is what makes others afraid. From the drawer, I took a pocket recorder I used to use in meetings. I charged it and tested the mic. The little red light blinked steady. I slipped it into the coat hanging behind the door. While I was plugging it in, footsteps sounded in the hall. Sloan was on the phone, her voice low and detached. "Don't worry, baby. Everything's lined up. I told him the house needs to be redone to welcome a baby. That old woman doesn't know anything about paperwork." A pause. Then a quiet laugh. "Yeah, if this plan works, we get the whole house. Trust me." I closed my eyes, clenched my fists, and forced myself not to fling the door open. I needed to be silent. I needed her to believe I was weak, that I'd given up. When her footsteps faded, I opened my eyes, heart still racing. I opened my notes app and typed, "Call on March 15th, 8:27 a.m. Got the latter part recorded. Check levels." I saved it and set the phone down. At noon, I brewed myself a black tea and stared out the window at the little garden. The daffodils I'd planted last year still bloomed despite weeds and dead leaves. I thought of my mother, my father, and the sister I just lost. They used to say, "You're the one who keeps the house." But sometimes, to keep it, you have to clear out what's destroying it. I took a sip. The gentle bitterness spread across my tongue. And I understood it was time to clean house for real. That afternoon, I walked the property as if just checking things. In reality, I was memorizing locations: cabinets, the safe, the file drawers, the boxes holding bank records. I found the original 1993 purchase contract, the roof repair invoices, the homeowner's insurance papers, all in my name. I tucked them into a manila folder, sealed it, and locked it away. When night fell, the house sank into silence. From upstairs, I heard Sloan's soft laugh on the phone, glasses clinking, low jazz playing. A house once filled with loving voices had become a stage where I was forced to play the harmless old mother. But behind the curtain, I had my own plan. On my computer, I created a subfolder under Case Sloan, Dinner, Plan. I typed the first lines, short and clear like an old finance report. Date, March 17th. Location, home, main dining room. Objective, observe, record, capture reactions. Attendees, Andrew, Sloan, her parents. Plan, appear frail, agree to give up room. Plant, recorder, place a mini camera in the vase on the shelf. Do not argue, only document. I reread it, deleted the word revenge, and replaced it with proof. I didn't need revenge. I needed the truth to be seen, recorded, and believed. Before bed, I checked everything again. Recorder charged, phone on silent, file packet hidden. I lay back on the folding mattress as moonlight slipped through the crack in the door. Inside, the pain was still there, but beneath it something else was growing: clarity. In the dark, I whispered, "Fine, Sloan. Keep thinking I don't know a thing. But when that dinner happens, you'll be the one who can't swallow." And I smiled. The first real smile since my sister died. Not from joy, but because I knew, from this moment on, everything would change. The next morning I woke before dawn. Rain from the night before still misted down. The chill slipping through the door made me shiver. I brewed a black coffee, no sugar, no cream, then sat at the small table in the storage room, the warm light just enough to show every crease on my hands. In front of me was the manila folder I'd spent days preparing. Bank statements, photos of my belongings tossed into the yard, recordings, house papers, and my expense ledger. Everything was ready. I checked the clock. 7:40. My appointment with attorney Amit Patel was at 9 a.m. in his small downtown Portland office. I took a deep breath, picked up the folder, pulled on my long raincoat, and drove my old Toyota Camry off the quiet street. With each time the tires rolled through a puddle, I felt a little lighter, as if every turn of the wheel was carrying me out of the dark. Mr. Patel's office was in a red brick building along the Willamette. Inside smelled like coffee and old paper. Mr. Patel, a man of Indian descent around 50, with half-rimmed glasses, came out and shook my hand. "Miss Vivian, it's been a while. I heard your voice on the phone. It didn't sound good." I gave a thin smile. "It wasn't good, Amit." We sat. I opened the folder and laid out each set of documents in order. "These are 8 months of statements. These are the scene photos, and this is the original house deed." He skimmed, nodded slowly. "You did exactly right, documenting and preserving evidence. Most clients come when it's too late." He flipped a few pages and stopped at the deed copy. "This house is still in the name of Vivian Cole, right?" I nodded. "Correct. Andrew never completed a transfer because I'd said I would leave it to him after I passed. Mr. Patel set down his pen, voice turning firm. "Then here's the good news. Legally, you remain the sole owner. No one can sell, lease, or alter the property without your written consent. Andrew and his wife are occupants by permission tenancy at will under Oregon law." I took in each word like water after a long thirst. "That means," he continued, "if you choose, you can terminate their right to stay at any time with proper notice." I stayed quiet, but something painful and peaceful rose together inside me. This house, my life's work, was still mine. Mr. Patel carefully drew the file toward him and started noting items. "Now to the money," he said. "What's your estimated total loss?" I read slowly. $86,400 withdrawn, not including heirlooms, the walnut cabinet, the rocking chair, embroidery, estimated another $12,000. He nodded. "We'll appraise the full loss and prepare a detailed inventory. Everything sold, withdrawn, or destroyed goes into the restitution claim." He opened his computer and typed quickly. "First, protect your finances. I want you to 1. Change all bank passwords, including retirement accounts. 2. Disable Andrew's secondary card today. 3. Turn on transaction alerts by email. 4. Remove utilities from Andrew's name if any are tied." I wrote each line. "All done. Today," I said. He leaned in, voice low. "Do you want to file suit immediately?" I thought. "Not yet. I want to give them one last chance to understand consequences." He nodded and scribbled a few lines on a pad. "Then we start with a formal notice. In it, I'll propose a lawful lease for Andrew and Sloan at $1,650 per month. Set a plan to repay the $86,400 over 48 months with a minimal 2% interest to formalize the debt. Add a breach clause. If more than 30 days late, the lease terminates and they must vacate within 21 days under Oregon eviction rules." I looked at him, window light reflecting on his lenses. "And if they refuse to sign?" "Then we file a civil action and issue a lawful eviction notice." "With your evidence, this is straightforward." I nodded slowly. "One more thing," I said. "I want a clause. The back portion of the house where I'm living now must remain as is. No one can enter, lock, or change the lock without my consent." He smiled. "You're as sharp as you were in your accounting days." "I'll add it." We sat quietly for a moment. Outside, the rain had stopped, and sunlight began to stretch across the traffic. I placed my hand on the folder and said softly, "Amit, I don't want to destroy my son. I want him to understand that respect isn't granted, it's kept by action." He looked at me, eyes gentle. "I understand, Vivian. But sometimes, to teach respect, you have to let them face consequences." He slid a document across and pointed to the signature line. "This is the legal authorization for me to represent you through the whole process." I signed, my handwriting steadier than I expected. As the pen lifted, it felt like laying the first brick of a wall to protect myself. "The letter will go out within 48 hours, he said. "You'll get a copy by email and a printed copy by mail. I'll prepare a backup in case they try to deny receipt." I nodded, gathered the papers, and placed them back in the folder. Before I left, Mr. Patel asked, "Do you want me to state the reason as a dispute over use of property or as unlawful occupancy?" I smiled. "Call it unlawful occupancy. I want them to read that loud and clear." We shook hands. His grip was warm and firm, offering a rare sense of safety in the chaos. When I stepped out of the building, the rain had fully stopped, and midday sun made the river sparkle like a strip of silver. I stood for a moment, breathing the damp air, listening to sparrows on the roofline. It had been a long time since I felt this calm. Not because it was over, but because, for the first time, I knew I was doing the right thing. I got in the car and turned on the radio. An old jazz track came on, the kind Andrew used to play as a kid while doing homework at the kitchen table. I smiled sadly, but didn't turn it off. I let the music carry me back along the road home, the road where now I knew every brick, every shingle, every window still bore my name. And inside me, a voice whispered, slow but clear, "Fairness and respect. That's all I want, and I will have it." I got a text from Andrew that noon. "Mom, let's have dinner as a family tonight. Sloan wants everyone to talk calmly and find a solution." A solution. I smiled and quietly closed my phone. The people who treated me like a burden suddenly wanted to talk calmly. I knew that kind of reconciliation usually smelled scripted, and I knew exactly what role I'd play tonight. All day I barely ate. I organized Mr. Patel's files and tucked the thick sealed envelope neatly into my handbag. By late afternoon, I showered, combed my hair, and put on the blue knit dress, the one my sister once said made me look both classy and steady. I looked in the mirror at my eyes under the warm light. The sadness of the past 2 weeks was gone. What remained was something quiet, cool, and very clear. Around 6:30 p.m., the smell of food filled the house. Roast meat, sauce, and buttered bread, the dinner looked more elaborate than usual. I went upstairs, listening to the chatter from the dining room as I walked. Sloan stood in the kitchen, busy, the corners of her mouth lifted in a smile too practiced to be natural. Her parents, Gregory and Elise Mercer, were already seated, pouring wine. I'd never liked them. He's the type who speaks with a built-in sneer, and she always half smiles, like she's taste-testing other people's patience. "Vivian, you finally came up," Sloan said, voice soft but sharp. "We just want a peaceful dinner, no tension." I sat across from them and glanced at the neatly folded white napkin in front of me. "I hope so too," I answered slowly. "It's been a long time since I've seen anything like peace in this house." Dinner started. Knives and forks clicked against plates in steady little chimes. No one spoke for the first few minutes, just the sound of wine being poured and Sloane's fake laugh when Elise talked about an acquaintance opening a senior living facility in Eugene. "It's wonderful," Elise said, looking at me. "At your age, having a quiet place with attentive care is what anyone would want." Gregory nodded and added, "Right. At this age, living alone can be inconvenient for both generations. A senior facility makes it easier on everyone." I set my fork down and looked up. "You're talking about me, aren't you?" Elise took a sip of wine. "Oh, we're just suggesting it because Sloane says you've been tired. Andrew worries about you too." I gave a small smile that made the table pause for a beat. "I'm not tired. I'm just busy counting how many things that used to be mine have disappeared." The air in the room dipped. I looked at Sloane. Like my mother's walnut cabinet. Or my father's rocking chair. She sighed theatrically and ducked the topic. "Mom, we're just trying to brighten the house. Those old things don't fit the style anymore." I kept quiet, cut another small piece of meat, and chewed slowly. It felt like even the meat knew what I was waiting for. Gregory stepped in, aiming for neutral. "Sloane and Andrew are thoughtful. But maybe they need more control over managing the family finances. Young people have their own way, Miss Vivian." That was my moment. I set down my utensils, dabbed my hands with the napkin, and opened my bag. Mr. Patel's envelope slid out thick, and I set it squarely in the middle of the table. "In that case," I said, voice light as a breeze, "let's make the finances clear." All eyes turned to me. I opened the envelope and pulled out the letter on Patel and Associates letterhead. "This is a legal notice. From now on, Andrew and Sloane will sign a formal lease at $1,650 per month. They will also repay the $86,400 withdrawn from my account over the past 8 months, over 48 months, with 2% interest." Gregory's wine tipped over the rim and dripped onto the tablecloth. Elise held her breath. Andrew sat frozen. "Sloane," she just smirked. "You don't have to do this," she said tartly. "I didn't expect you to turn everything into spreadsheets like some professional manipulator." I lifted my head and met her eyes until she had to swallow. "I used to be an accountant, yes. And I'm also the person who still holds title to this house." Then I took out my phone, opened the Case Sloane folder, and turned the screen so the whole table could see. My father's rocking chair was right there, the scratch on the armrest and the words, "Sold, $650 underneath. "Elise," I said, "if it looks familiar, it should. Your daughter sold it. Along with a lot more." The air went thick as syrup. Andrew's hands shook as he set down his glass. "Mom, what are you saying?" "I'm saying the truth," I said, "and I've documented everything. Statements, receipts, listings. I don't need to shout. I just need evidence." Gregory flushed and stood. "You're threatening my daughter in our house?" I tilted my head slightly, voice calm in a way that surprised even me. "Wrong. This is still my house, and this envelope is the last chance for my son and his wife to stay here with basic decency." No one spoke. The wall clock ticked, 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 like a countdown to an explosion. Sloane let out a short, hard laugh. "Pathetic. You think you can scare me with paperwork? I'm pregnant, and you're throwing a pregnant woman out of a house. Do you feel inhuman?" I leaned back, eyes never leaving her. "Really?" I asked, soft as air. "Then when will you show me the prenatal results?" The question hit the table like a brick. Silence. Andrew turned to Sloane, eyes spinning. I thought. You said." Sloane shot to her feet and slammed her spoon down. "I don't have to prove anything. She just wants to divide us." I didn't say more. I just looked at Andrew, my eyes sad but steady. "Son, I've lost too much by staying quiet. From now on, I won't be quiet." The room went still. Gregory grabbed his coat, muttered something, and tugged Elise away from the table. Sloane stood there, pale, lips trembling. Andrew couldn't form words. I stood, slid the envelope back into my bag, and said softly, "I'll leave the letter on the kitchen counter. You have 48 hours to read and sign." Then I left the dining room. Behind me, dishes clattered the sound of a dinner breaking apart, like ice cracking underfoot. Walking down the stairs, I didn't feel shaky, just relieved. Maybe because for the first time, the scale tilted toward what's right. I went into the two together. The storage room, now my strategy room, sat on the folding mattress and looked out the window. Outside, the first snow flurried, drifting down like ash after a battle. But inside me, a clear, steady flame kept burning, and I knew the real fight was only beginning. That night the house was dead quiet after the emotional storm. I thought it had all ended with the shattered spoon and my son's exhausted stare, but close to midnight, a soft knock sounded at the storage room door. 3 knocks, hesitant, weak. I sat up, turned on the lamp, and watched the door tremble. "Mom, it's me." Andrew's voice was hoarse, tired, broken. I opened the door. He stood there, gaunt, eyes bloodshot. The warm yellow light showed a face that used to be bright, now early lines and panic. "I can't sleep," he said, voice shaking. "I'm scared of losing the house, Mom. I don't know what to do." I stood there, silent. Part of me wanted to hug him. Another part wanted to hold the line. "I don't want to throw anyone out." I answered slowly. "That's why I offered the lease. If I wanted revenge, I would have changed the locks a long time ago." Andrew dropped his head, fingers laced tight. "Sloan, she said if we don't have this house, she'll leave me. I don't want a divorce, Mom. I'm just scared of losing everything." I looked at my 36-year-old son, the man who once said, "I'll take care of you like Dad did." Now he was just a big kid, tied up by fear and lies. I sat on the edge of the bed and motioned for him to sit across from me. "Tell me, Andrew, who sold your father's chair? Who decided to withdraw the money?" He took a slow breath. "Sloan," she said, "your old stuff made the house look poor. She said our friends would laugh if they saw it." A cold blade went through me. "And you?" I knew it was wrong, but I didn't dare argue. "She threatened to tell people you control the money, that I don't. I have a voice. I didn't want anyone to think I'm unfilial." I closed my eyes. Every word weighed like lead. I understood Sloan took more than money. She took my son's backbone, and part of that was on me. "Andrew," I said, low, "I used to think loving you meant shielding you. Maybe I was wrong. I let you get used to someone else cleaning up your mess." He stayed quiet, shoulders trembling. "Mom, I don't want to lose you." I sighed and met his eyes. "If you truly don't want to lose me, then tomorrow you sign the contract. I want nothing but respect. And if you let anyone take even one more cent from my accounts, you push yourself out of my life." He nodded, tears rolling onto his clenched hands. "I understand. I'll do it." "No," I corrected. "You have to do it." We sat in silence for a few minutes. The living room clock ticked steadily. When Andrew stood, his shadow stretched long and shaky across the floor. "I know you're right," he said, "but I don't know if I'm brave enough to face her." I watched him walk up the stairs, my heart sinking. My door closed, leaving a heavy quiet behind. I sat there staring into the dark and realized sometimes a mother's love is a double-edged knife. It can save, or it can make someone so soft they forget they can stand up on their own. I took out my phone and opened my messages with Mr. Patel. I typed a short line, "Tomorrow at 9 a.m. They'll be there. Prepare the contract." After sending it, I turned off the main light and left the desk lamp on. In its dim glow, the little recorder on the shelf blinked red. I'd left it running since early evening. I was about to lie down when soft steps crossed the upstairs floor. A door clicked shut. Then Sloane's voice, small but clear, came through the paper-thin wall. "I told you, just a few more months. Just a few more. Once that old woman signs all the papers, I'll say I had a miscarriage. No one can. Blame me then. People say family is the safest place. But sometimes it's where you have to learn to protect yourself. If you've ever been deceived by family, would you choose to forgive or let justice speak? I want to hear your thoughts. Just one comment says a lot. A pause. Then a man's voice over the phone, low and distant. You sure? Sure. This house is worth a little more suffering. I went rigid. Every word dripped acid onto my heart. Miscarriage, a lie preloaded and planned in detail. The pregnancy itself was likely just a show. I didn't jump up. I lay still, eyes open in the dark. My heartbeat pounded in my ears like a drum. Part of me shattered knowing my son had been fooled this far. Another part, colder, turned to steel. I looked at the recorder. The red light blinked, steady. I knew that conversation was saved. The room was still cold, but inside me, a slow flame rose, not the burning kind, but the kind that hardens resolve. I pulled up the blanket and whispered into the dark, "Go on, Sloan. Keep lying, keep scheming. This old mother isn't as stupid as you think." Outside the window, rain started, ticking steadily. I listened to each drop, like counting down the minutes until the dawn when justice would start to speak. The next morning, Portland wore a thin veil of fog. The early sun hadn't pierced the gray. The streets were slick and shimmering after the night rain. I sat in the back seat, hands on my file bag. Andrew drove in silence, and Sloan sat beside him in black sunglasses, lips pressed tight. No one spoke. The air in the car was heavy enough that I could hear the soft hiss of the vents. Mr. Patel's office was on the third floor of an old building near the river. When we walked in, he was already waiting, white shirt, blue tie, serious but calm. On the table, a neat stack of documents and 2 silver pens. "Thank you for being on time," he began, voice light but firm. "I want this meeting to be clear, transparent, and civil. Miss Vivian is the lawful owner of the home. You two are occupants by permission. You have no ownership rights, only temporary residency. We'll set a lease and a repayment plan to make it legal." Sloan smirked, arms crossed. "I don't need a law lecture. I'm only here because Andrew said I had to be." Mr. Patel adjusted his glasses and looked at her through the lenses. "Very well. I'll go straight to terms. Rent at $1,650 per month, a 1-year lease with automatic renewal if paid on time. The $86,400 will be paid back over 48 months, with 2% interest to avoid it being treated as a gift. These terms will be publicly recorded and notarized by our office." She tilted her head, a mocking smile flashing. 2% interest? You're charging your own son interest? I looked straight at her, my voice not loud but clear. "I'm charging interest to the person who took my money. As for my son, he's just paying the price for staying silent too long." Sloane's face reddened, ready to snap back, but Andrew put a hand on her arm and gave a small shake of his head. "Sign it," he said quietly, drained. "You're taking her side. I just want peace." She yanked her arm away and slumped into the chair, voice tight. "Fine. I'll sign. Mr." Patel slid the first page to Andrew. His hand shook. He inhaled, then signed. The scratch of the pen filled the quiet room, sounding like a blade cutting some invisible cord between mother and son. Sloan stared at the signature, lip trembling, then grabbed the pen. She signed fast, as if to end the ache, and pushed the stack back to Mr. Patel. He flipped through each page, checked, then pressed the seal. "Good. The lease is effective today. Payment schedules will be emailed. I've also recorded the list of sold heirlooms, the walnut cabinet, the rocking chair, the hand embroidery, and the wooden chest. I'll work with an appraiser on a separate restitution figure." Sloan let out a short, dry laugh. "She's going to invoice her memories now?" I didn't answer. I just looked at her, not angry, not pitying, just the look of someone who has seen too much deceit. "No one can repay memories," I said quietly, "but losses still need a price." The room seemed to freeze. Mr. Patel filed the papers into a folder and closed it. "I hope this is a first step toward order. I don't represent anyone here except fairness. I nodded, thanks. Andrew kept his head down. Sloane sprang up, put her sunglasses back on, and raised her voice. You win, Vivian. But remember this, when your grandchild is born, you'll never see them. I stood, picked up my bag, and faced her, voice low but steady. Don't use a child as a shield. You'll need more than that to keep yourself clean. Her smile vanished. She turned, dragging Andrew out. Her heels hit the tile sharp as a second hand scraping across a clock. I stayed, watching the door ease shut, then turned to Mr. Patel. He was quiet for a moment, then said softly, You know they won't accept this easily, right? I know, I said, but at least they had to start with a signature. Out by the river, the wind cut cold. I pulled my coat close, feeling fatigue settle into my joints. But under the tiredness was a small peace. For the first time in months, I didn't feel pushed out of my own life. On the way home, I stopped at a little hardware store. I bought 2 new locks, a few key sets, and a screwdriver. The young clerk smiled and asked, Fixing up the house? I said, No. I just want to make sure my room stays mine. Back home, wet leaves dotted the yard. I heard Sloane slam the bedroom door. Andrew went upstairs without a word. I said nothing, just headed to the storage room, the only place I felt calm. I changed the room's lock, turned the key, a few times to be sure, then slid a small cabinet in front as a second barrier. The dry scrape of metal on metal sounded harsh, but each click felt like reclaiming another piece of ground. On the table, I sorted the newly signed papers into a hard plastic sleeve and sealed it. Then I called a storage facility out in Beaverton, the one I'd used when I moved a decade ago. I'd like to rent a small unit, about 40 square feet, I said. I need a safe place for a few valuables. The man on the line set an appointment for the next morning. I wrote down the address and closed my notebook. By evening, I gathered what was left. My parents' old frame, a few of my sister's books, my mother's knit scarf. I wrapped them carefully and took them to Mrs. Whitaker's. She opened the door, startled. Vivian, dear, you look so thin. I smiled, keeping it light. Just leaving a few things here. My room doesn't feel safe. She took my hand, warm, firm. Leave them here. I'll watch them. Don't worry. By the time I got back, dusk had faded. The house was strangely silent. I switched on the storage room light. The yellow glow washed over the blotchy wall. I sat, leaned back, and the waves of exhaustion rolled in. Then a stab of pain hit my chest. My head swam, my breath went shallow. I pressed my hand to my chest and tried to breathe deep. My pulse skittered fast and messy. The room blurred for a few seconds. I tilted my head back, closed my eyes, and listened to my heartbeat thudding out of rhythm. I thought of Andrew, of his shaking hand as he signed, of eyes that looked like he'd lost himself. I thought of Sloane, with her cold smile and last threat. I thought of the house that used to be full of laughter, now just a place of wandering shadows. The pain eased. I forced my breath slow and shut my eyes. In the dim room, I heard the rain begin steady, slow, cold. It laid a dull film over everything, like a curtain hiding my loneliness. I whispered, barely a sound. Just get through tonight, and tomorrow everything will be different. But deep down, I knew tonight wasn't peace. It was only the quiet before another storm. I don't remember exactly when I passed out. I just know the rain was still falling off the eaves when I collapsed right at the storage room door. My chest cinched tight like a steel cable, my breaths grew short, and the new set of keys slipped from my hand. Something sounded far away, maybe Mrs. Whitaker shouting my name, then everything dropped into an icy void. When I opened my eyes, the white ceiling of Providence Hospital hung above me. The familiar smell of disinfectant made me shiver. A white coat leaned in. A gentle male voice said, "Mrs. Cole, you're awake. You had a stress-induced pre-heart attack event. Thankfully, your neighbor called an ambulance in time." I blinked and tried to speak, but my throat was dry and raw, an IV in my arm, the needle cold. The door eased open. A nurse came in, followed by Mrs. Whitaker, her eyes red. "Vivian, you scared me half to death." I knocked, and no one answered. Good thing I heard something fall inside. I managed a weak smile and squeezed her hand. "Thank you, you saved me again." Less than 6 hours later, news of my hospitalization reached my 2 kids far away. By afternoon, the door flew open and I heard the familiar footsteps. Hannah, my daughter, reached me first. Her brown hair was pulled back, her face thinner than the last time I saw her. Behind her was Lucas, my youngest, the one who calls me weekly but hadn't been home in 2 years. "Mom!" Hannah's voice broke as she hugged me. Lucas gripped my hand and leaned close. "The doctor said it was down to minutes. Do you know how scared I was?" I couldn't speak. I just laid my shaking hand over theirs, the warmth slowly easing my heart. The pain in my chest lingered, but inside, it felt like someone had just lifted a boulder. An hour later, the doctor returned, serious but compassionate. "You need complete rest and to avoid stress for at least 90 days. Your heart's more fragile than average. We'll prescribe blood pressure meds, a vasodilator, and recommend a therapist to help reduce stress." I nodded faintly, though all I could picture was the house, the place I knew I'd have to go back to, like it or not. After he left, Hannah pulled a chair close and stroked my hair the way I used to soothe her as a child. "Mom, come stay with me for a month. My place in Manhattan has a spare room, a housekeeper, and a private doctor. You need quiet." I smiled weakly. "Hannah, thank you, but I need to stand firm in my own home. If I leave now, they'll think I gave up. And I haven't, you understand?" Lucas perched on the bed's edge, fingers laced, eyes grave and sad. "I'll talk to Andrew, not to take sides, just so he understands how much you've endured." I nodded slightly, gaze far away. "Talk, but don't go in angry. He's fragile, Lucas. The storm already took a piece of him." Hannah bent and pressed her cheek to my hand. "Mom, I promise we won't leave you alone this time." I smiled, eyes stinging. "You're grown. I couldn't ask for more." They stayed the night. I heard Hannah whispering with a nurse in the hallway, and Lucas stretched out on the window bench. Each time I cracked my eyes open and saw the dim light on their faces. Time rolled backward. The 3 kids who once fought over the back seat on road trips were now grown, each with a life of their own. Together again only because their mother had fallen. The next morning, the doctor brought forms for new medical power of attorney. "In any emergency, who do you want making decisions for you?" I looked at Hannah and Lucas. Both of them. "What about your eldest son, Andrew?" I shook my head, calm. "I want everything separated from him for now. I need peace." The doctor nodded. Understood. All that day, Andrew never showed. No call, no text. I wasn't surprised. Sloan likely had him wrapped tight in sweet lies. That afternoon, Hannah set lavender by the bed. The soft scent eased my head. "Mom, anything you need, just say it," she whispered. I gave a thin smile. "Just seeing you safe is enough for me." 3 days later, I was discharged. Hannah and Lucas grabbed the bags, while I walked slowly, one hand on my chest, my pulse still jumpy. Outside, the world had cleared after the rain. Sunlight filtered through the trees, lighting their hair as they leaned into the wind. Pride and sorrow rose together and caught in my throat. On the drive home, Lucas took the wheel, and Hannah sat up front. They chatted softly so I wouldn't have to think. I watched the trees slide by. It was so calm it made me nervous. Calm is often the sign the waves are coming. When we turned onto my street, my heart sped up. The white gate stood wide open. The front yard was strangely bare. The bench, where I used to read the paper, gone. The small wooden sign etched "Coal Home," since 1993, gone. I stepped out, the smell of wet wood and cold earth hitting me. The yard was spotless, none of my things remained. No planters, no flower pots, no doormat. Even the mums I'd planted in early fall were gone, just streaks of mud and fresh tire tracks. Hannah's mouth fell open. "Mom, where is everything?" I didn't answer. I walked slowly toward the door, each step heavier than the last. The storage room lock had been changed. The curtain inside twitched like someone had just pulled it shut. I stopped, breath caught in my throat. The doctor's words rang in my head: cut sources of stress for 90 days. But how does any mother stay calm when the home she sweated to build is being stripped layer by layer, breath by breath? Lucas moved ahead and tightened his hand on my shoulder. "Mom, let me go in first." I nodded slightly and watched. My tall son crossed the threshold, his eyes bright in the afternoon light, reflecting the anger he was trying to hold back. Hannah squeezed my hand, voice shaking. "Mom, you have to be strong. Please." I stood still. Inside me, everything condensed into one quiet question. People can take all the things. Can they take the will of a mother who has almost lost it all? The answer arrived with the last breath of daylight. No, they can't. I was still standing. I still had a heart, a mind, evidence, and my 2 true children at my side. In the pale sun, I looked at the empty house and heard the wind through the trees whisper, "Stand tall, Vivian. Storms drop leaves. They don't uproot." 2 days after I left the hospital, on a damp, cold morning, my phone rang. A familiar woman's voice, hesitant, trembling as if she were holding something back, said, "Miss Vivian, it's Elise Mercer, Sloane's mother. We need to talk. Once." Just us. I froze for a beat. Elise, the woman who met my eyes with arrogance at that family dinner, now sounded urgent. I hesitated a few seconds, then answered, "I'm listening." "Not on the phone. I'll text the address of a coffee shop 10 minutes from your house. Don't tell anyone, not even Andrew." Her voice shook, so unlike her usual chill. I agreed, partly out of curiosity, partly because my gut said this mattered. The cafe, Maple and Steam, sat on a small street lined with blazing golden maples. I arrived 10 minutes early. Elise was already there, no makeup, no jewelry, hair pulled back, gray sweater that made her look worn. When I pulled out a chair, she just nodded, no greeting. No small talk. In front of her lay a light brown envelope, thick, one corner creased. She slid it to me, eyes turned away. "I don't know where to start," she said softly. "But some things, if I don't say them, I won't sleep." I looked at the envelope. My fingers brushed the seal. It felt hot. "About Sloane?" I asked. Elise nodded, head dipping. "Yes. About everything she's done and what she can't do." I opened the envelope. Inside, medical records, credit card statements, screenshots of texts. The pages bore the logo of a fertility clinic in California. I flipped. Failed IVF cycle, November 2019. Then, patient cannot conceive naturally. Alternative treatment recommended. I looked up. Elise clutched her cup so hard her nails dug into her palm. "She can't have children," she said quietly. "We've known for 4 years. Sloane hid it from everyone, including Andrew." When I asked why she wouldn't tell the truth, she just smiled and said, "Because if I tell the truth, no one stays." I went still. Each word hit my chest like a blow. She handed over more screenshots, including, "I'll say I'm 3 months pregnant. Easy, just buy a fake positive test online. After a few months, I'll miscarry. Who's going to verify? You act shocked. People will pity us. Then we'll have the house." My hands trembled. My coffee had gone cold. I stared at Elise, speechless. She pulled a tissue and wiped her tears. "I know you think I'm as awful as she is." But I can't keep quiet. Sloan is addicted to shopping, owes more than $42,000 on credit cards. Gregory and I have paid it 4 times, and she keeps going. Gregory doesn't know this. If he found out, it would crush him. He thinks she's perfect. She exhaled, fingers knotted tight. I was proud of her once. Now I'm afraid. She can't tell what's real anymore. She's dragging too many people down with her, including your son. I set the envelope down, my voice low but firm. Why tell me? You could have stayed silent and I'd never know. Elise lifted her red eyes. Because I can't watch her destroy other people's lives. I've stood by too long. I owe you and I owe my daughter the truth. We sat in. Silence for minutes. The room's sounds faded until there was only the clink of a spoon in porcelain and 2 heavy breaths from 2 women betrayed, one by her daughter-in-law, one by her own child. Right then, Hannah walked in. I'd asked her to come, just told her I needed a witness. She reached the table quickly and shook Elise's hand. Without much explanation, I slid the envelope to my daughter. Hannah took out her phone and photographed every page, every screenshot. Mrs. Elise, thank you, Hannah said softly. We'll send this to Mr. Patel right away. He'll know how to protect my mom. Elise nodded, voice tight. I don't want a lawsuit, I just want it to stop. If Sloan keeps going, she'll lose everything. I let out a small breath. Inside me, feelings tangled, anger, pity, and a strange hollow. This wasn't victory. It was release from an illusion. All the times I'd asked myself, am I being too harsh? Is Sloan really pregnant? They evaporated like fog in sunlight. Hannah put her phone away and squeezed my hand. Mom, let's go. I stood and looked at Elise one last time. Thank you. I know this wasn't easy. She nodded, tears sliding down. No, Vivian, thank you. At least now someone knows I still have a conscience. On the way home, Portland wind slid along the windows, carrying the damp smell of early rain. Hannah drove in silence, eyes straight ahead, while I sat holding the envelope. The papers inside rustled with each bump in the road, as if to remind me the lies now had shape, proof, and weight. I pulled out my phone and typed quickly to Mr. Patel. Now have medical and financial evidence of Sloan's fraud. Sending supplementary file. The message sent. The screen lit and went dark. Outside, the trees along the road were changing color. Fall in Portland is always like this, beautiful and sad, beauty that shows up only after something is lost. Hannah glanced over and asked softly, Mom, do you feel lighter? I gave a thin smile. Not lighter, clearer. Light is when it's over. This is just the start. I opened my contacts and found my eldest. My finger hovered over Andrew Cole for a few seconds. A lump rose in my throat. He was still my son, the boy who once tore around the yard on a red bike. Now he lived inside a trap he couldn't see. I texted, Tonight. Come see me. Alone. No one else. I set the phone down, closed my eyes and leaned back. I didn't know how tonight's talk would end, only that it would change everything, not just for me, but for Andrew's future. Outside, the gray sky sank low with clouds, another rain coming. I shut my eyes, breathed deep, and felt my heartbeat slow, not from fear, but from readiness. At last, after all these years of endurance, the truth had opened its own envelope. And this time, I was ready to face it, not the pain, but the consequences of patience I'd held too long. That night, Portland sank into fog so thick the streetlights looked melted into the air. I sat in the living room, a small lamp pooled light on the oak table. In front of me, the file Elise gave me, clipped neatly inside a manila envelope. Everything was ready. Around 8 p.m., 3 slow, heavy knocks sounded at the door. I stood, heart pounding, and opened it. Andrew stood there, gaunt, slumped shoulders, gray face. His suit rumpled, deep shadows under his eyes, like he hadn't slept in days. Mom. His voice was hoarse, like a man who'd lost his bearings. I said nothing, just opened the door wider. Inside, Hannah and Lucas sat on the sofa, silent. On the table, the file lay like an unexploded bomb. Andrew came in, glanced around, paused when he saw his siblings. I gestured. "Sit!" He sat, fingers knotted, eyes avoiding mine. I slid the envelope toward him. "Read," I said, low and clear. He hesitated, opened it, and pulled out the pages. I watched his face eyes moving slowly, then stopping. His hands trembled, his lips tightened. A minute later he whispered, almost to himself, "No way." "No." Sloane said, "It can't." He flipped to the next page, screenshots of texts, clinic notes, infertility records. His eyes went glassy, like he couldn't believe the words. I heard his breath quicken, as if each line was siphoning air from his lungs. "I didn't want it to come to this," I said slowly. "But you need the truth, no matter how deep it cuts." Andrew looked up, eyes red. "Mom, are you sure? Maybe they made a mistake." I didn't answer. I just took out my phone and dialed. "Where is she?" Hannah asked softly. "On her way," I said. "I told her to say it to your face." In less than 10 minutes, a car pulled up outside. Sloane came in long coat, pale face. She froze when she saw Hannah and Lucas, a flash of caution in her eyes. "What is this? A family tribunal?" I didn't bite. I pointed to the chair opposite. "Sit, Sloane. You have a lot to explain." She sat, arms crossed. "If this is about the lease, I've got nothing else to say." I pushed the file toward her. "Not the lease, the truth." She looked down, read the first lines, then looked up, her lips twitching. "Where did you get this?" "From your mother," I said. She couldn't keep the secret anymore. Silence. The room seemed to lock in place. Andrew stared at his wife. "Is it true?" he asked. Voice rough. Sloane pressed her lips together and turned away. "It's nobody's business. I just didn't want to lose you, Andrew. If you knew I couldn't have a baby, you'd leave. I was trying to save our marriage." Hannah slapped the table. "Save it by faking a pregnancy and planning a miscarriage?" Sloane snapped back at her. "You don't get it. He promised the house would be his when his mother died. I just wanted to secure our future. This is all because of him." Andrew reeled as if struck. He stood, hands to his head, stumbling back. "Because of me? Because of me you lied to my family? Sold my mother's things? Took money from her account?" Sloane screamed. "You promised, Andrew. You said, 'Mom won't live forever. It'll all be ours.' I just made that promise come true sooner." The sound shattered like glass. The room went deathly still. My heart thudded heavy, but my voice came out startlingly calm. "Happiness built on lies is a sandcastle, Sloane. The first wave just hit." She gave a harsh laugh, stood, voice cracking through tears. "You win, Vivian. You've always wanted to see me fall. Congratulations." She slammed the door so hard the painting on the wall tilted. When the door closed, Andrew collapsed to the floor, face in his hands. The sob that tore out wasn't a grown man's, it was a lost child's. I went to him, sat beside him, and held him just like all those times he skinned his knees and I ran to wipe them clean. "Son," I said softly, "sometimes losing the wrong person is a blessing, better than keeping someone who makes you lose yourself." He didn't answer. He just cried quietly, head on my shoulder. Hannah and Lucas stood close, pained but relieved. This hurt, though deep, was the first step toward healing. After nearly half an hour, Andrew looked up, eyes drenched but clearer than I'd seen in years. "Mom, I'm going to divorce her." I squeezed his hand and nodded. "Good, do it right. I'll ask Patel. And I'm moving out. I can't stay in this house." "Where will you go for now?" Lucas asked. I found a small studio near work. I just need a few days to sort things out." In his voice I heard something I hadn't in a long time: resolve. 2 days later, Mr. Patel came to the house with new files. He sat right at the dining table, the place that used to be a battlefield at dinner, now a temporary office. "I've received the info from Hannah," he said. "I'll file for compensation for the family heirlooms that were sold, and also seek damages for emotional distress caused by fraud, misappropriation, and fabricating a pregnancy." Andrew sat beside him and nodded. "I agree. I want to take responsibility. I've also canceled the authorized user card and locked every linked account. She won't touch another dollar." Mr. Patel took careful notes, then looked up at me. "Miss Vivian, I have to be honest, few people your age keep their composure like this. This truth could collapse a lot of people." I gave a thin smile. "Collapse is their problem, not mine. I'm just choosing to stand." That night the house was still. Andrew had moved most of his things out, leaving only the old watch his father once gave him. When he headed to the car, I stood at the door and looked at my son one more time. "Mom," he said, "I'm sorry." I shook my head. "No, Andrew, you did the right thing. Don't let someone else's mistakes bury you." He lowered his head. The streetlight washed over his gaunt face. I watched until his taillights disappeared around the bend. In my chest, a wound tore a little wider, but strangely, I felt lighter, as if this pain was necessary to rinse away years of self-deception. I went back inside and ran my hand over the tabletop. This place had been the eye of the storm of lies. Now only the warmth of truth remained, bitter, but true. And sometimes, that's enough to begin again. I once thought every storm would eventually pass, but with Sloan, it only changed direction, it never stopped. Less than a month after Andrew filed for divorce and Patel submitted the compensation claim, she struck back. On an early winter morning, Patel called, his voice calm with a faint chuckle. "Miss Vivian, Sloan has filed a countersuit. She's accusing Andrew of emotional abuse and demanding $120,000. I closed my eyes and took a long breath. Not surprised, just tired. I know. Sloan's kind, when truth slips from their hands, they invent a new story to keep going. Patel told me to come to the office the next morning. When I arrived, he had all the evidence spread out: bank statements, photos of antique listings, the audio file about the planned miscarriage, and a printed set of texts Hannah had collected. "I've submitted these to the court before they review the countersuit," Patel said. "Now we just wait for the hearing." On the court day, Portland drizzled. The courtroom was small, but the air was heavy like a ceremony of judgment. Sloan sat across from us, pale, dark circles under her eyes, still trying to look composed. Next to her was a young, confident attorney flipping through files. Andrew sat at the defendant's bench, quiet, hands clasped. I sat behind him, between Hannah and Lucas. It felt like the three of us were walking a battlefield without needing to say a word. Sloan began her testimony. Her voice shook, mixing anger with fragility. He, Andrew Cole, drove me into a mental crisis for months. He controlled the finances, humiliated me, and, together with his mother, pressured me to leave the house. I looked at the judge, a woman in her 60s with a firm but fair gaze. She nodded once and signaled to Mr. Patel. Patel stood, his voice low, each word landing like a tap of a gavel. "Your Honor, I'd like to present rebuttal evidence. These are account statements showing $86,400 withdrawn without authorization over 8 months. These are antique sale listings and a walnut chair ad that match property belonging to the plaintiff, Vivian Cole, mother of the defendant. And this is an audio recording in which Miss Sloan Mercer admits faking a pregnancy and planning a miscarriage to gain her husband's trust and access the Cole family's assets." The room fell utterly silent. I heard a pen clatter from the clerk's desk. Sloan dropped her gaze, lips pressed tight, eyes glaring at Patel. The judge adjusted her glasses and opened the file. "Miss Mercer, do you deny this evidence?" Sloane stammered. I was set up. My mother hates me. It's all fabricated. Right then. The courtroom door opened. Elise walked in, haggard, a large envelope in hand. She stepped to the witness stand, voice trembling but steady. I am Sloane Mercer's mother. I will testify that everything Mr. Patel said is true. My daughter lied about being pregnant, spent excessively, and deceived both our family and the Cole family. Sloane spun around. Mom, how could you? Elise cut her off. Because you don't know where to stop, because I've helped you lie too many times. The room went quiet again. I saw Gregory, Elise's husband, in the back row, head bowed, face covered with his hands. The judge tapped the gavel lightly, then read her interim ruling. The court rejects the entirety of Miss Sloane Mercer's damages claim. The lease and repayment agreement between Miss Vivian Cole and Mr. Andrew Cole are recognized as lawful and in effect. The court also notes evidence of potential credit fraud and will refer the matter to law enforcement for investigation. Patel tilted his head toward me, a small signal. It's done. I exhaled, not triumphant, just feeling a long emptiness lift from behind me. A week later, the Portland paper ran a short piece. Police are expanding an investigation into credit fraud related to Sloane Mercer after additional victims reported instances of false borrowing and unauthorized purchases. I read it and felt no joy. It was like watching someone sink and knowing I couldn't pull her up anymore. That afternoon, I heard a soft knock. When I opened the door, Gregory Mercer stood there with his hat in hand. He looked much older, more gray, voice hoarse. I came to apologize, Miss Vivian. I didn't see the truth sooner. Elise told me everything. We're disappointed, but at least you gave her a chance to make it right, even if she didn't value it. I looked at him and nodded gently. No apology needed. You're a victim, too. He squeezed my hand, his grip trembling, warm and sad. Then he turned and walked away, shoulders bent in the late-season cold. Time passed, and the house grew peaceful again. Each month, Andrew transferred $1,650 in rent and $1,800 toward the debt, right on schedule. With every transfer, he left a small note. Month 3, still trying. Month 5, Mom, I've begun again. I saved each message in its own folder. Not for the money, but because they proved that clarity can take root in ruin. Patel stopped by once more to show me the final order. The court has granted the full compensation request. You can rest easy, Vivian. No one's touching your assets again. I just gave a small smile. Thank you, Patel. Now I only want quiet. The law has spoken for me. Every morning I practice deep breathing. Just as the therapist taught. Inhale for 4 seconds. Hold for 7. Exhale for 8. I started walking in the Portland rain. The steady drizzle I used to hate now feels comforting. It makes me notice the rhythm of life and my own existence. The flower bed out front, the place where my mother's wedding veil was once thrown, is replanted. I chose lavender and white daisies, the 2 flowers she loved. When my hands touch the soil, it's cold but real. With every root I press down, I feel a crack in my heart knit a little. At night, with wind at the window, I sit with a hot cup of tea and listen to the rain on the shingles. No more arguments. No more Sloane's icy tone, only my heartbeat slow, steady, and calm. I think justice isn't revenge. It's the moment you can breathe without choking, look back at losses without your hands shaking. And that night, for the first time in years, I turned off the light without fearing the dark. In the quiet, I listened to the rain on the newly planted bed like a blessing from the past for this fresh start. 6 months passed since the court ruling. Spring returned, and Portland smelled of damp earth and wildflowers. My house, the one that once echoed with fights, was now so quiet I could hear the wind threading the pines. This time, the silence wasn't heavy. It was the hush of renewal. One morning, Andrew called. His voice was lighter, clearer, without the old tremor of exhaustion. "Mom, I did it," he said. "The house paperwork. I transferred everything back in your name. No strings left." I sat silent for a few seconds, listening to my own heartbeat. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. You've carried too much. I just want to do what's right. This house has always been yours." I nodded even though he couldn't see it. "Thank you, Andrew." "No," he said softly. "I should thank you for not giving up on me." After the call, I sat a long time at the window, looking at the lavender blooming purple. In my mind, I no longer saw a weak, manipulated son. I saw a man learning to begin again. Maybe a mother's love isn't sheltering forever. Maybe it's stepping back so your child can stand. A few weeks later, I began to refresh the house. Not to forget, but to revive it. I hired a small crew, the older craftsmen who painted for me back in the 90s. They scraped the old finish, rolled on a soft cream, swapped harsh white bulbs for warm amber light. My room, once the place where they threw my things, became itself again. I hung the family photos that survived, the 3 kids laughing by Mirror Lake in 2003, the dark wood frame polished bright by Lucas. One afternoon, Hannah brought a big box. Inside was a brand new rocking chair walnut, glossy, with a pale floral seat. "You said you missed Grandpa's old chair." Hannah smiled. "I couldn't find it, so I got this. Maybe it'll become Grandma Vivian's chair in our memories." I sat. It creaked softly, gentle and unbelievably soothing. I closed my eyes and almost heard my father's laugh, my mother's hum on the porch. Lucas carefully restored my parents' wedding photo frame, the one shattered into pieces when Sloane stomped it. He picked up each shard, reassembled it, then sealed it with a protective coat. "Look, Mom," he said, "sometimes what's been broken is more valuable because it's been held together with love." I stared at the photo as tears slid before I could stop them. The fine cracks remained, but my parents' eyes shone, as if they were smiling at me. That evening we rehung the wooden sign on the porch. The old one had rotted, but the new carving was clean. Vivian's home. Lucas set brass nails and drove them firm into the post. The final strike rang out clear and sure, like a declaration. This place, at last, belonged to its rightful owner again. Andrew started individual therapy. He told me one afternoon on our walk, "They're helping me spot signs of manipulation. I can say no now, Mom." I smiled lightly. "Now you have your own boundaries, and I'm learning to protect them," he said. "Not just with other people, also with myself." I looked at my son, feeling love, pride, and a small ache like watching someone stand up after a fall, scarred but looking forward. One Sunday afternoon, I invited Mrs. Whitaker for tea. The woman who called 911 and saved me that day still looked small, but her eyes were kind. "Vivian, you look much better," she said with a gentle smile. "I owe you more than thanks," I replied. "If you hadn't made that call." She set her hand on mine. Now. "We just did what people should do. You living well, that's what makes me happy." We sat on the porch, wind carrying pine and damp earth. 2 women, 2 cups of tea, 2 shaken lives now peacefully steady. Sunday night, my 3 kids had dinner with me. I made chicken soup like my mother used to, with a sprinkle of black pepper, the aroma filling the kitchen. After we ate, Hannah brought out my sister's poetry, the sister who left just before all this started. We read the lines she once wrote. "Home is not a shelter, but the place we dare to return after every break." No one spoke, but we all understood. My sister had been right. Your home is truly yours only when you're strong enough to stand in it without fear. That night, under a small lamp at my wooden desk, I rewrote my will. I divided things fairly. A portion for each child, with clear conditions. Whoever keeps respect and boundaries keeps their share. No one is allowed to manipulate, lie, or hijack love for money. I also set aside a small fund for a center that helps victims of family fraud and financial coercion. I know there are many like me, older people turned into tools for someone's greed. If my story can help someone speak up, then maybe what I went through wasn't wasted. When I finished, I folded the paper and placed it in my mother's wooden box, alongside her old wedding ring and a family photo. It wasn't just a will, it was my last message to the people I love. Night fell. I went back to my room, warm and golden, the window open to the scent of pine and spring rain. The rocking chair creaked softly, rain ticked on the porch. I laid my hand on my parents' wedding photo, the lamp reflecting on their faces as if they were looking at me, satisfied. I closed my eyes. No more fear at the sound of a door. No more flinching at the wind. Everything was in place, finally. In that moment, I knew justice, kindness, and respect are the three pillars of this roof. It took me almost a lifetime to learn how to guard them, but in the end, I did. And for the first time in years, I slept well in my own room, with the smell of damp pine wrapped in a peace no one could take. A year after I saw my belongings scattered across the grass, I stood before the old flower bed, the one once smeared with mud and tears, watering each lavender root with a gentle hand. The scent lifted into the damp air, soft as a blessing. I leaned down and whispered, "It's done." Not a victory cry, but a closing line. A long year of loss and healing. The final word on Sloan came in early spring. The court gave her a suspended sentence along with a restraining order to keep away from me and restitution for other victims she'd borrowed from under false pretenses. I felt no glee, no bitterness, only a hollow quiet like watching a storm drift off, leaving long streaks on the glass. Andrew finished paying off everything he owed me 6 months ahead of schedule. He didn't say much, just sent the money, until the last note popped up. Month 18 complete. Thank you, Mom. I read it and smiled. A sincere apology doesn't need words, only action. And Andrew did that. That afternoon, the whole family gathered in the living room to set up a small memorial for my sister. Hannah lit candles, Lucas set the frame, and Andrew brought white daisies. I told my kids and the grandkids about Grandpa's rocking chair, how he used to lull my sister to sleep there, humming on winter nights. The story stretched across generations, tying us together not by blood alone, but by memories and love we kept. As the candles burned low, I told my children, dignity is not a gift to give away. Boundaries aren't coldness, they're love with thought. Anyone who crosses your line without asking doesn't truly love you. Hannah nodded, eyes glossy. Lucas squeezed my hand and whispered, "I think you just taught us the most important lesson of our lives." The next day, I tidied the yard, swept dry leaves, and wiped the rain streaks off the porch. I realized not only was the house cleaned, my life was being put back in order. No more shadows carrying lies, no more suspicious looks or weight in my chest walking through the door. I had cleared the toxins from my life with the law, with patience, and with faith that honest people don't keep losing forever. That evening, I opened my laptop and wrote a piece for the community about financial abuse in families, something few discuss but many suffer silently. I told my story, no names, no rancor, just how a 65-year-old woman stood up properly within the law and kept her kindness. When I hit send, I felt lighter. Somewhere, someone might read it and find a little courage in those lines. Before bed, I opened the new wooden cabinet Lucas helped me build. Inside, I placed my mother's wedding scarf, now clean, pressed, and scented with lavender. I smoothed the folds, as if touching time. That scarf had witnessed generations of women in my family, those who endured, those who rose, those who learned to live with self-respect. Now it was my turn. I closed the cabinet, then stood on the porch and watched the Portland rain fall like threads. Drops beaded on the rail, glinting under the warm light. I breathed in, feeling the heat rise through my skin. Every wound, every storm had become part of a survival story. Inside me, a message rang gentle but firm, not just for me, but for anyone who's been hurt, called selfish for choosing themselves. If they call your strength selfish, smile, because you just saved yourself. Thank you for staying to the very end of my story. If you're still here, maybe somewhere in these lines you saw yourself or someone who hurt you. Life sometimes makes us walk through loss to learn true self-love. I believe every wound can become light so long as we hold on to dignity and kindness. I'm curious, where in the world are you listening from? Leave a comment, share your thoughts on boundaries, on self-respect, or simply on what helped you stand up after days when you thought you had nothing left. If this story touched your heart, a like, a subscribe, or even a small note can help it travel farther to those who need to hear they aren't alone, and they can still begin again. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for listening, for understanding, and for staying with me to the end. Sometimes, one person willing to listen is enough to save a story.